The 91-year-old veteran and the bikers James Jim Callahan sat alone in a small-town diner, nursing a cup of coffee. The 91-year-old World War II veteran had seen a lot in his lifetime: combat, loss, and the struggles of returning home to a world that often forgot its heroes. But tonight, he was about to witness something entirely unexpected. The diner was a quiet, hole-in-the-wall place, the kind Jim liked. It was the kind of spot where you could sit for hours, lost in memories, without anyone rushing you out. But as the bell above the door jingled, that quiet comfort was shattered. A group of 5 men in black leather jackets strolled in, their heavy boots thudding against the tile floor. Their presence commanded attention. Patches on their vests read, "Iron Claws MC," a motorcycle club with a reputation for causing trouble. The waitress behind the counter stiffened as she noticed them, but she forced a smile and asked, "What can I get for you boys?" The bikers ignored her at first, their eyes scanning the room. Then, their leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a graying beard, spotted Jim sitting alone in the corner. Well, the man sneered, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "Look what we have here. A relic from the past." Jim glanced up from his coffee, his expression unreadable. He'd dealt with worse in his lifetime. "Respect your elders, son," he said simply before taking another sip. The biker leader chuckled. "Respect? What did you ever do to earn mine?" He leaned against Jim's table, smirking. "You some kind of war hero?" Jim sighed. He didn't like to talk about the war. The memories of his fallen brothers were sacred, not stories to impress strangers. "Something like that," he said. The other bikers snickered, pulling up chairs around him. "Bet you got all kinds of medals, huh, old man?" One of them mocked. "Tell us, did you save the world, or just sit behind a desk?" Jim set his coffee down, his eyes locking onto the leader's. There was steel in his gaze, the same unshakable resolve that had carried him through the war. "I fought for this country," he said evenly. "So punks like you could have the freedom to act like fools." That struck a nerve. The leader's smirk faltered. "Watch your mouth, old man," he growled, his fingers tightening into fists. The diner fell silent. The waitress took a step back. A few other customers hurriedly paid their bills and left. Jim sighed and reached into his pocket. The bikers tensed, thinking he might be grabbing a weapon. Instead, he pulled out an old flip phone, the kind most people hadn't used in years. With steady fingers, he dialed a number. The bikers exchanged glances, amused. "Who you calling?" "The nursing home," one of them laughed. Jim didn't answer. He held the phone to his ear, waited a moment, then spoke 3 simple words, code red. "Now." Then he hung up. The bikers chuckled at first, but then something changed. A distant rumble filled the air. It started as a soft growl, barely noticeable, but within seconds, it grew louder. And louder. Engines. Lots of them. The bikers turned toward the diner's front window, and their smirks vanished. A swarm of motorcycles roared down the street, their headlights piercing the darkness. One after another, they lined up outside the diner, blocking the bikers' own rides. The Iron Claws watched, their faces turning pale as more than a dozen riders dismounted. They weren't just any riders. They were veterans. Leather jackets bearing patches of various military branches, insignias from wars past, and a single, unifying phrase: "Brotherhood protects its own." The leader of the new arrivals, a burly man with a Vietnam veteran patch on his vest, stepped forward. He looked through the window, spotted Jim, and nodded. Then he pushed the diner door open. "Evening, Jim," he greeted warmly. Jim gave a small smile. "Good to see you, Mike." Mike turned to the Iron Claws. His eyes darkened. "You bothering my friend here?" The bikers, so tough a moment ago, suddenly didn't look so brave. The leader tried to play it off. "Nah, just talking," he muttered, stepping back. "Didn't mean no disrespect." Mike folded his arms. "That's so?" "Because it looked like disrespect to me." The rest of the veteran bikers stepped inside, their presence heavy with unspoken authority. These were men who had fought wars, survived battles, and lived to tell the tale. They had nothing to prove, but everything to protect. The Iron Claws leader swallowed hard. "We were just leaving." Jim nodded. "Smart choice." The bikers hurried out of the diner, brushing past the veterans without daring to meet their eyes. They climbed onto their motorcycles, only to find that they couldn't leave. One of the veterans chuckled. "Keys." The Iron Claws realized that their keys had somehow been taken. Jim took another sip of his coffee, then tossed the missing keys onto the table. Next time, try showing a little respect. The Iron Claws quickly grabbed their keys, started their bikes, and roared away into the night. The diner, silent moments ago, erupted into applause. The waitress let out a relieved breath. "That was incredible," she said. Mike turned to Jim with a grin. "You know, you could have called me for a friendly chat instead of scaring off punks." Jim chuckled. "Where's the fun in that?" The two men shook hands, their bond unspoken but understood. Because in the end, brotherhood never fades, no matter how many years pass. And Jim? He finished his coffee in peace. Jim Callahan sat back in his booth, a faint smirk on his weathered face. The Iron Claws had fled, their tails tucked between their legs, and the diner was finally at peace again. The waitress, a young woman named Lisa, refilled his coffee with a grateful smile. "On the house, Mr. Callahan," she said. "That was amazing." Jim nodded in thanks but didn't respond. He wasn't looking for admiration. He had just done what needed to be done. The other veteran bikers had settled into a few booths around him, their laughter filling the air as they swapped old stories. Mike, the Vietnam vet who had led them in, slid into the seat across from Jim. "You sure know how to make an entrance," Jim said, stirring his coffee. Mike chuckled. "You're the one who pulled the alarm, old man." "Code red? Haven't heard that in years." Jim smirked. "Figured it'd get your attention." The two men sat in comfortable silence for a moment, lost in their own thoughts. The world had changed since they were young, but some things never did: loyalty, honor, and the understanding between men who had seen war. Then, the doors swung open again. The mood shifted instantly. The Iron Claws were back. But this time, they weren't alone. A dozen more bikers stood behind their leader, their expressions hard, their jackets marked with the same insignia. The diner fell into stunned silence as the newcomers filled the space, blocking the exits. Jim sighed and set his cup down. Guess they didn't learn their lesson. Mike cracked his knuckles. Guess we'll have to teach him again. The Iron Claws leader, still nursing his bruised ego, took a step forward. "You think you can embarrass us and get away with it?" His voice was low, full of barely contained rage. "We don't let things slide." Jim didn't even flinch. He simply took another sip of coffee. "You can always try, son." The leader's eyes burned with fury, but before he could act, another voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." A new figure stepped forward from the back of the Iron Claws group. He was older than the others, his graying beard and sharp eyes radiating authority. His vest had more patches than anyone else's, and the second he spoke, the other bikers fell silent. Jim squinted at him. There was something familiar about this man. The old biker studied Jim for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across his face. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "Jim Callahan?" Jim frowned. "Do I know you?" The man stepped closer. "It's me, Travis. Travis O'Malley. We served together, back in Korea." Jim's eyes widened. Travis O'Malley. The name hit him like a punch to the gut. He hadn't heard it in decades. Memories flooded back. Young soldiers huddled in foxholes, gunfire tearing through the air, the bitter cold of the Korean mountains. Travis had been there, fighting alongside him, saving lives, making impossible choices. Jim slowly stood. "Travis. I thought you were gone." Travis chuckled. "And I thought you were dead." Guess we were both wrong. For a long moment, the two old warriors just stared at each other. Then, without a word, they embraced, brothers reunited after a lifetime apart. The tension in the diner melted away. The younger Iron Claws exchanged confused glances, unsure of what to do. Finally, Travis pulled back and glanced at his men. "Stand down," he ordered. "This man is a hero. More than any of you know." The Iron Claws hesitated but ultimately obeyed. The leader, now looking small and ashamed, stepped back without another word. Travis turned to Jim. "You still riding?" Jim chuckled. "Not as fast as I used to." Travis grinned. "Doesn't matter. Once a rider, always a rider." He motioned to his bike outside. "Come on, old friend. Let's go for a ride, for old time's sake." Jim glanced at Mike, who smirked and waved him off. "Go on, Jim. You've earned it." With a nod, Jim grabbed his coat and followed Travis outside. The night air was crisp, the roar of engines filling the streets as the veteran riders prepared to roll out. As Jim climbed onto the back of Travis's bike, he felt something he hadn't in years, a spark of youth, of adventure, a brotherhood that never truly faded. As the bikes thundered into the night, Jim smiled. Some bonds could never be broken. The end. Or maybe, just the beginning. Jim Callahan hadn't ridden in years, but as the wind rushed past him, he felt young again. The world blurred, the rumble of engines vibrating through his chest. He wasn't just an old man in a diner anymore. He was a soldier, a survivor, a brother among warriors. The convoy of veteran bikers cruised down the highway, the night stretching endlessly before them. Jim rode behind Travis, gripping the old friend he once thought lost. The iron claws had backed off, their arrogance shattered. They had learned a valuable lesson tonight: respect is earned, not demanded. After a while, the group pulled into a small rest stop on the outskirts of town. The riders parked their bikes, stretching their legs, laughter and stories filling the cool night air. Jim sat on a bench, staring up at the stars. Travis dropped down beside him, handing him a bottle of water. "Didn't think I'd ever see you again," Travis admitted. Jim took the bottle, twisting the cap off. "Life's funny like that." Travis nodded. "You know, after Korea, I didn't go back to the army. Thought I'd had enough. Started writing, found this club. Some of these boys lost their way. Not bad men, just lost." Jim took a sip, his gaze steady. "Then teach them." Travis exhaled, rubbing his beard. "Yeah, maybe it's time for a change." He looked at Jim. "You ever think about getting back on a bike full-time?" Jim chuckled. "I think I'd break a hip." Travis laughed, shaking his head. "Nah, you still got it." Silence settled between them, comfortable and familiar. Then Travis reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, pressing it into Jim's hand. Jim looked down. It was a metal pin, a simple emblem of a skull with wings, a symbol of the Brotherhood. "Means you always have a place here," Travis said. "No matter where you go." Jim swallowed. His fingers closed around the pin. "Thanks, old friend." The other veterans, including Mike, gathered around. "We're gonna ride out toward the lake," one of them said. "You coming, Jim?" Jim hesitated, then smiled. "Why the hell not?" The engines roared to life again. As Jim swung his leg over the bike, he felt it, not just the rush of the ride, but the feeling of belonging, of being part of something greater. As they disappeared into the night, Jim knew one thing for sure. The war might have ended long ago, but the Brotherhood? That would never die.